Hello, inner shifters, how you doing? Your host, Sophia here. Okay, deep breath because this one's personal. Let's talk about what it really means to recognize your emotional hunger signals. Not in some textbook, clinical check the box kind of way. I mean in the real, raw 2 a.m. Standing in front of the fridge kind of way. Because if you've ever reached for snacks when you weren't physically hungry, just craving comfort, welcome, you're human. First, let's start here. Emotional eating doesn't mean you're weak or broken or undisciplined. It means you have feelings. It means you're trying, sometimes in the only way you know how, to give yourself something when something feels missing. That might be comfort, distraction, soothing, grounding. Whatever it is, it's real. And it makes sense. But recognizing emotional hunger, that moment when your body says, feed me, but your heart is actually the one that's empty, is where power begins to return to you. My friend Clara, who, if you've stuck around my stories, pops up a lot, had this thing she'd do after a rough work meeting. She'd get home, barely kick off her shoes, open the cupboard, and start eating whatever was there. Didn't matter if she'd had lunch 2 hours earlier. It didn't matter if her stomach wasn't grumbling. Something inside her needed to chew, to numb, to distract. We talked one day after she'd eaten half a bag of cookies and cried on the couch. And I asked her gently, when did you first feel the need to eat today? And she paused, blinked a few times, and said, right after the meeting. I felt this tightness in my chest. I just wanted it to stop. That was it, that was her signal. Emotional hunger often shows up like that. It's urgent, like flipping a switch. It's not a slow build like physical hunger, where you notice a little growl, some fatigue, maybe a slight headache. Emotional hunger screams louder. It says, I need something right now. And often it demands specific foods, comfort foods, quick hits of sugar or salt. Not because your body wants nutrients, because your heart wants relief. Science helps us understand this too. When we're stressed, our body releases cortisol, a hormone that increases appetite and particularly cravings for high-fat, high-sugar foods. It's not weakness, it's wiring. Stress biology says, we're in danger, we need fast energy, grab the chips. And in small doses, that makes sense. But when stress becomes chronic and we start responding to every uncomfortable emotion with food, it becomes a loop. Not just physical, but emotional and neurological. There's a study published in Appetite that found people under emotional distress, especially anxiety or loneliness, were significantly more likely to engage in what the researchers called non-homeostatic eating, or eating not driven by real physical need. And participants often didn't even realize they were doing it. They felt a pang, reached for food, and only after the fact asked, wait, was I even hungry? And that's the question I want you to start carrying, not with judgment, but with curiosity. When you feel the urge to eat, ask yourself, where is this hunger coming from? Is it in my stomach, or is it in my chest, my throat, my thoughts? Because physical hunger tends to build over time, and it's satisfied by a variety of foods. Emotional hunger tends to demand something specific, often urgent, and even after eating, there's still a hole. A sense of that didn't fix it. And here, where things get tender because sometimes emotional eating does feel like it works. Momentarily, it soothes, it distracts, it grounds. And in some ways, it's okay that your body figured out how to care for you the best way it knew at the time. Food is accessible, it's fast, it's been tied to comfort since childhood. So we don't shame that part. We thank it, it was trying to help. Then we ask, what else can help now? Mateo, a friend of mine who'd often eat late at night after long shifts, started noticing that most of the time he wasn't hungry, he was tired. His body craved rest, but food felt easier than confronting the fact that his days were too full, his schedule too packed. So he made a deal with himself. When the urge to eat hit after 9 p.m., He'd pause, drink a glass of water, and sit down for 5 minutes with his eyes closed. If he still felt physically hungry afterward, he'd eat. No punishment, no guilt. But more often than not, those 5 minutes told the truth: you're not hungry. You're exhausted, let's rest. That's what recognition looks like, not rules, not restriction, pause and check in. Another way to tune in is through patterns. Does your hunger always spike after a hard conversation? After scrolling social media? When you're lonely on Sundays, pay attention to the emotional rhythms that accompany your urges. Clara kept a little journal, nothing elaborate. Just time, feeling, and craving. Over time, she saw it clearly: boredom, chips. Loneliness, ice cream, frustration, cheese. And once she knew, she could choose. She didn't stop eating those things forever. But she learned to ask herself first, what do I need right now besides food? And that opened up space. Maybe she needed a walk. A stretch, a good cry, a playlist that matched her mood, a friend to text. Sometimes it was food. But now it came from a place of choice, not compulsion. There's a beautiful term in psychology: interoceptive awareness. It means your ability to recognize and interpret signals from your body. Hunger, fullness, tightness, tension, breath. And like any skill, it can be practiced. You can learn to understand your body's language again, even if diet culture or trauma or years of disconnection pulled you away from it. Start with breath, with pausing. With asking questions like, where do I feel this hunger in my body? How intense is it? What was I doing or feeling before this urge showed up? Sometimes just that awareness dissolves the urgency. You go from I need to eat now to oh, I'm overwhelmed, I need a break. And that right there is the moment you step back into your power. Remember, recognizing emotional hunger is not about denying yourself food. It's about giving yourself what you actually need. It's about nourishing the real hunger. For comfort, for peace, for rest, for love. Food can be part of comfort always. You're allowed to find joy and safety in eating. But let it be conscious, let it be kind. Let it be paired with presence and gentleness. Oh, that's the shift. So the next time you feel that sudden craving, that drive to numb or soothe or disappear into a snack, pause. Breathe, ask, and see what your heart has to say. Because chances are it's not saying, feed me. It's whispering, see me, hold me, help me feel safe again. And I promise you are wise enough to hear that voice you've always been. All right, let's dive into this together. Let's talk about keeping a gentle journal of your triggers, not in a rigid, I must track everything kind of way, but in a soft, curious, and compassionate way. Because understanding your emotional eating triggers isn't about control, it's about awareness. And awareness is where freedom begins. So let me tell you about Clara again. She's one of my favorite people to talk about because her journey with emotional eating has been so real, so messy, and so inspiring. When she first started trying to figure out why she was eating when she wasn't hungry, she felt overwhelmed. I don't even know where to start, she told me, it just happens. One minute I'm fine, and the next I'm halfway through a bag of chips. And that's the thing about emotional eating, it often feels automatic, like you're on autopilot. But here's the truth, there's always a moment before the autopilot kicks. A moment where something shifts, an emotion, a thought, a sensation. And that's the moment we're trying to gently notice. I suggested to Clara that she start keeping a little journal, not a food diary, not a calorie tracker, but a feelings journal. Just a small notebook where she could jot down what she was feeling before she reached for food. No judgment, no overthinking. Just a quick note, stressed after work, lonely on a Friday night, bored during Netflix. At first, she resisted. What if I don't know what I'm feeling, she asked. And I told her that's okay. Just write down whatever comes to mind. Even if it's I don't know. The first week, she only wrote in it twice. But by the second week, she started noticing patterns. Every time she felt overwhelmed at work, she craved chocolate. Every time she felt lonely, she wanted ice cream. Every time she was bored, it was chips. And suddenly, what had felt like random, uncontrollable urges started to make sense. They weren't random at all, they were her body's way of saying, "Hey, I need something." This is where the magic of journaling comes in. It's not about fixing anything right away. It's about shining a light on the patterns that have been hiding in the dark. Because once you see them, you can start to make choices. You can start to ask, what do I really need right now? There's a beautiful study from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, that found that simply labeling your emotions, just numbing them, reduces activity in the amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for fear and stress. It's like your brain says, oh, we've named this feeling. We don't have to panic about it anymore. That's what journaling does. It helps you name what's happening inside you, so you can respond with clarity instead of reacting on autopilot. Mateo, another friend of mine, took a slightly different approach. He didn't love the idea of writing things down, so he started using voice memos on his phone. Whenever he felt the urge to eat emotionally, he'd record a quick message to himself. I just got off a stressful call and I feel like eating cookies. I think I'm just frustrated. It was messy and unpolished, but it worked. Hearing his own voice helped him connect with what he was feeling in a way that writing did. The point is, there's no one right way to do this. Maybe you write, maybe you record. Maybe you just pause for a moment and think, what's going on inside me right now? The method doesn't matter as much as the intention, to slow down, to notice, to be curious. And let's talk about curiosity for a second because it's so important. This isn't about judging yourself or trying to fix anything. It's about approaching your triggers with the same kind of curiosity you'd have if you were watching a movie or reading a book. Oh, that's interesting. Every time the main character feels sad, she goes to the bakery. I wonder why. That's the energy we're going for here. Gentle, open, and kind. One of the most powerful things Clara told me after a few weeks of journaling was this. I realized that I'm not actually craving food most of the time. I'm craving comfort, I'm craving connection, I'm craving a break. And that realization changed everything for her. Because once she knew what she was really craving, she could start finding other ways to meet those needs. When she was stressed, she started taking 5-minute breathing breaks instead of reaching for chocolate. When she was lonely, she'd call a friend or write in her journal instead of eating ice cream. When she was bored, she'd go for a walk or try a new hobby instead of grabbing chips. Not every time, she wasn't perfect and she didn't need to be. But more and more, she started choosing what she really needed instead of defaulting to food. And here's the thing, this isn't about never eating emotionally again. Emotional eating isn't inherently bad. Sometimes a bowl of ice cream really does feel like the comfort you need. Sometimes sharing a pizza with friends is exactly what your heart is craving. The goal isn't to eliminate emotional eating, it's to make it a choice, not a compulsion. To eat with awareness, not autopilot. So if you're feeling stuck in a cycle of emotional eating, I want you to know this. You're not broken, you're not weak, you're just human. And you have the power to start noticing your patterns, to start understanding your triggers, and to start making choices that feel aligned with what you truly need. Start small. Maybe you write one sentence in a journal. Maybe you record one voice memo. Maybe you just pause for 5 seconds before you eat and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? That's enough. That's more than enough. Because every time you pause, every time you notice, you're building a bridge back to yourself. Back to your body, back to your hearts. Let's open the door to something truly nurturing, creating a soothing alternatives menu. This is one of the most empowering things you can do when you're trying to break the automatic loop of emotional eating. And the beauty is, it's not about deprivation, it's about expansion. Giving yourself more options to care for your feelings instead of just defaulting to food. Let's build something beautiful and human here. First, let's just honor something. Emotional eating makes sense. It's quick, it's accessible, it's comforting in the moment. You're not doing something wrong when you reach for a snack during stress, you're just trying to feel better. And you deserve compassion for that. But what if your comfort menu was bigger? What if instead of one go-to coping strategy, you had 10, 20, a whole list of soul-soothing things you could turn to in those fragile moments? That's what this is about. So let me tell you about Clara again, our ever-evolving friend on this journey. She had this sticky spot around 4 p.m. every day. She called it her snack spiral. She'd be knee-deep in emails, her energy dipped, her mind tired, and boom, into the pantry. One day we sat down and asked what else could meet that need, not fake solutions. Real soothing, real replenishment. And that became her first alternatives menu. She wrote it out, stuck it to her fridge, and it had things like light stretching, listening to one favorite song, putting lavender oil on her wrists, stepping outside barefoot for 5 minutes, writing down a thought and letting it go. Not rules, not punishments, invitations. And here are what happened. She didn't stop reaching for snacks completely, but she paused, she considered. And sometimes, more and more, she reached for something that left her feeling even better. You see, when you build a toolkit that fits you, you start to trust that food isn't the only comfort you have access to. You begin to rewire your emotional response. This isn't just anecdotal, it's backed by brain science. The brain thrives on associative learning. When you're stressed and you eat and it soothes you, the brain says, "Yes, that worked, let's do that again." But when you pair that same stress with a breathing exercise that calms your heart rate, or music that lifts your spirit, or a 5-minute walk that clears your thoughts, your brain begins to say, "Oh, this works too." Oh, and the pattern shift. Matteo, a friend of mine who often reached for snacks during long nights of studying, created a comfort corner in his home. It had fairy lights, cozy socks, a journal, a playlist of calming music, and his favorite scents. That little corner became his refuge, his reset. Sometimes he still had snacks there, but they weren't the only soothing thing. They were part of a broader, more intentional ritual of care. That's the shift. Food can still be part of your comfort. It just doesn't need to carry the entire weight of your emotions. Think about what makes you feel safe. What helps you breathe deeper? What reminds you of beauty, pleasure, creativity, connection? Maybe it's brushing your dog. Maybe it's coloring with your kids. Maybe it's putting your hands in water, or lighting a candle, or texting someone who always gets you. Make it easy, make it visible. A handwritten list on your fridge. Say note in your phone titled, "When I want to eat but I'm not hungry." The goal isn't perfection. In its pause, it's possibility. And remember, this isn't a test. If you reach for food even after trying alternatives, that's okay. That's part of learning. You're rewiring years of habit. What matters is that you're showing up differently. You're creating space. You're asking, what do I really need right now? And sometimes just asking that question changes everything. So build your soothing menu. Stock it with options that meet your unique emotional flavor, whether you need quiet or movement, expression or stillness, solitude or a hug. And let it grow with you. You're not trying to get rid of emotional eating. You're trying to give yourself more ways to feel good. I thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, and do all those lovely things you wonderful people do. I'll see you next time.